Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. Are you guys all there? Everybody awake?
Yes.
Good old 8 o'clock in the morning classes. All right, let's give everyone a minute just to get back online. All right. People are still trickling in, but we'll get started anyway. Okay, so welcome back to Youth Development, DCE3205. So we're into week 2 now, and last week we just began with an overview of the class, introduction to the class, and then we started talking a little bit about what youth development is all about, right? So today we're going to continue with that discussion, and then we have some other things planned. So let me just jump straight to the Future Blast, where I have the agenda for the class today. All right. So every week I will post like an agenda for the class, so you can see what we're planning to do every week, inshallah. Okay, so here's today's class. All right. So before we start, just a few housekeeping issues, announcements, and so forth. So as you guys know, tomorrow is actually a holiday. It's Mawlid al-Rasul. And so we won't be having class, official class tomorrow. Okay. But I'm giving you a reading assignment for next week. So next week there's going to be a homework assignment, which is to read the chapter on youth development classic theories. Okay, and as you can see down here, I've uploaded it here, right? Because this week and next week we'll be discussing youth development theory. So this chapter will help you to better understand the lecture. And also the chapter itself, a lot of the content will be used for the exam. There'll be several exam questions related to the content in the chapter and in the lectures today and next week. So instead of having class tomorrow, I'm going to let you use tomorrow's class time if you choose. Of course, it's up to you, but you may use that time to do the reading for next week. Okay. And you can do that. I'll still take attendance for tomorrow. So as you can see, I have posted the attendance link here for tomorrow as well. All right. So again, it's a recommendation, okay, a suggestion that if you have time tomorrow, make use of the time to work on the reading. And you can do the reading together if you want to do it with your classmates. You guys can read it together, okay. In addition, from the reading, I'm going to ask you, as you can see here in put your last here, I'm going to ask you to, from the reading, come up with 3 questions, all right? So each person, each student, come up with 3 questions. Now, why questions? Why not answers? Usually the lecturer or the teacher will ask you for answers to questions, not questions. Well, this is what we call something referred to as inquiry-based learning. Okay. Oh, you can't hear me very well. I see. Okay. Do you need me to speak louder, Hazika? Or what do you suggest? Okay, you asked me to speak louder. Okay. Okay. I will try to speak louder. Okay. So I'm going to ask you from the reading, come up with 3 questions, 3 exam questions. Now, these are questions that if you were the lecturer in the class, what kind of questions could you ask from the reading that you would put on an exam, okay? And then you will bring them next week and present them in some form. Either I'll ask you to upload them to Padlet or something, okay? Or I'll just ask ask you to present the questions to the group. Okay, I'm not sure yet how. Next week we'll figure that out. Okay, but I want you each to come up with 3 questions from the reading. All right. So you get to play lecturer and you get to play professor, so you can ask me questions about the reading. Okay. Now I might even use your questions for the exam, which we're going to have in week 5. I think week 5 or 6. Let's go back and look. Okay. So that is the plan for tomorrow. Okay, tomorrow's class, and then for next week. All right, your homework assignment. All right. So today's lecture, actually, we're going to start lecturing. We're going to start discussing on theory. All right, and the theory lecture is broken down into 2 classes because first we start with what are called deficit-based theories, and then the second half is called positive developmental theories. Okay. In this chapter you're going to read only talks about the second half, or the positive developmental theories, which is what we focus on in this class. But we're going to also talk about the deficit-based theories and what that means. All right. Any questions about that? Anything requiring clarification? Boleh faham semua ke macam mana?
So far, so good.
Sorry? Is it okay?
Yeah, so far, so good.
So far, so good. Okay. And I hope Hazika can hear me now. I don't know if I'm speaking loud enough. All right. So as I mentioned last week, I like to start the class with some sort of discussion or presentation of current events and so forth. So today I'm going to, I want to share this article on financial literacy. All right. So as we all know, we're all experiencing COVID-19, right? And this is a big issue. This is a big issue for young people. And I don't have to tell you that. You guys are young people. So I can only imagine, I can only guess at the type of challenges you're facing as young people during COVID-19 from a financial perspective. Okay. And this article, which is in the New Straits Times, is talking about the problem of financial literacy and how a lot of young people are not very well versed in financial literacy. Who wants to, who can tell me what financial literacy means? Anybody know? What's financial literacy? Anybody know?
I think the ability to manage your money and how you spend it.
Yeah, thank you, Fatin. Very good. Fatin said,
How about
go ahead, Desmond.
how about money problem?
Yeah, well, if you don't have financial literacy, you run into money problems. Yes. So literacy typically means a basic working knowledge of something. You know the basics of how to manage, like Fatin said, how to manage your money, how to balance your income with your expenditures so that you don't run into too much debt, right? So your hutang, you keep your hutang low, right? And so, of course, whenever we face economic crisis like now with COVID-19, it's always much harder to manage our money because often people lose their jobs or they get pay cuts or there's less money coming in. And so it's hard. So this issue of financial literacy is a very big issue for young people because most young people don't make a lot of money. Even if you do, maybe you're on PTPTN, right? So you only get your monthly stipend every month, or maybe you have a small part-time job. You just make a little bit, or maybe your parents give you a little bit of money. So you don't have a lot of money to deal with to begin with. Then you added with that is the COVID-19 situation, and your money problems get worse, right? It's harder to manage your money, your finances, and to make ends meet and so forth. So the better we are at managing and knowing these things, which is what financial literacy is called, the easier it is. So this article here is very, very good because it really highlights the problem that the country faces in terms of um, financial literacy. A lot of young people don't know how to manage their money, right? Or they're not good. They're not good at managing their money. They're not effective at managing their money. Okay. So why don't we go ahead and just take, it's very short article. Just takes about 2 minutes to read it. Uh, so why don't you go ahead and read the article? And we can read it here. It's very short. I'll read it with you. We can read it together. Okay. So it says about 84,805 Malaysians were declared bankrupt between 2015 and 2019. Based on the figure provided by the Insolvency Department, people below the age of 34 made up 26% of bankruptcy cases. Right? So what's bankruptcy? Do you guys know what bankruptcy means?
People that declared bankrupt by any government when they exceed the limit of amount 50,000 for Malaysia.
Okay. Wow. Thank you, Effie. Very good. Yeah. So when they cannot make ends meet, they can declare themselves bankrupt. And what happens when you declare yourself bankrupt?
Your name will be listed in secrets, and it's hard when your name is being noted by secrets because you'll be blacklisted for any bank loan, cannot travel to another country without the permission of secrets.
Okay, so yeah, but in addition to that, what does it do for you? Does it help you at all in any way to declare yourself bankrupt? So for example, say you lose your job and you have no income and you cannot pay your debt. So you go and you declare yourself bankrupt to the appropriate agency. How does that help you at all? Does it protect you at all? What is the benefit of doing that? Effie, do you know?
I think
Not sure. Yeah, so of course it's very bad. It's on your financial record, it looks very bad. But at the same time, it does protect you in the sense that once the creditors, the people that you owe money to, once you've declared yourself officially bankrupt, it gives you a period of time so that you don't have to pay back your debts immediately. So it gives you a sort of grace period to get yourself back on your feet. So the people that loaned you the money will be notified that you've officially declared yourself bankrupt, and then they automatically have to, by law, give you a period of time for you to sort of get back on your feet so that you can pay your loans back. Okay, so it's supposed to work as a sort of protection for people who get in that situation where they cannot pay back their loans, okay, or their debt or whatever. All right. So, but of course, like you said, it goes on your record and it's very bad. If you want to get future loans and all that, it's very difficult, right? So a lot of this is from credit cards. How many of you have credit cards? A lot of people? You guys all have credit cards?
Yeah, have. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
Credit cards are very dangerous, aren't they?
credit card is a trap for me.
Yeah, it was a trap for me too when I was in college. When I was an undergraduate in the US, at that time in the early 1990s, they used to just the banks would just mail you credit cards without even you applying for them. They would just mail them to you. And they have these interest rates of like 20% interest. And before you know it, you're in a lot of debt. It's very dangerous. Is that what happened? Is that what's happening to you guys as well? How many of you have credit cards? On Zoom, you can use that little what you call it? What did I just do? I lost the. Okay. How many of you have credit cards? A lot of you?
No.
No.
Oh, nope.
We
I
just
don't
have
have.
debit.
Oh, you don't have. Oh, okay. So maybe in Malaysia, they're smart. They don't make it easy for students to get credit cards. But in other countries, many countries, students can easily get credit cards. It's very dangerous because it's just so easy to spend money with a credit card. And before you know it, you have so much debt, you just cannot get out of it. It's a huge trap. So as we can see in the article here, 47% of Malaysian youth have high credit card debt, right? And so because of the debt, the interest rates are very high. So even if the amount you spend is not very much, but the interest piles up, right? And so it makes it even more, and that makes it very hard to pay back. Right? So it's a trap. It's really a trap, especially for young people. Right? And so this has caused a lot of young people to go bankrupt, and they get into a large amounts of debt, and they cannot get out of them. Okay, so it's a very serious issue. And so here they talk about the importance of being financially literate, okay, and having the necessary skills to manage your financial resources. And they talk about the practice of 2 B's, budgeting and balancing, okay? So budgeting is basically identifying how much money you have coming in every month, your income, and how much is going out every month, right? So trying to balance that and being disciplined in watching your spending, right? And that's the hardest part for young people, is being disciplined in their spending, right? Because it's so easy just to go out and buy something. Right? So now I'd like to, okay, so that's basically what the article is about. It's just highlighting this issue of financial literacy and how much of a problem it is for young people. And it affects their development in a lot of ways. A lot of young people now, when they graduate university, they have massive amounts of debt. So even though you graduate university and you may get your first job, right, you are spending a lot of your money every month just paying back your debt. So you cannot, you cannot purchase a house, you cannot purchase a car, right? So to sort of get your career going and all that, you cannot do it because you're still just paying back all this debt. Okay, so now what I'd like to do is I'd like to just ask you guys a few questions in relation to this. If you go to Putra Blast, okay. So in the Putra Blast here, I'd like to ask you this question. I want to ask you, how has COVID-19 affected you all financially? And if you could, click on the link, and I'll put the link up here. I'll put in the chat box to make it easy. All right. If you could, just answer the question quickly. It's anonymous, so there's no names. I won't see anyone. No one's going to see your name. Okay. If you could just say a few words on how COVID-19 has affected you financially. Maybe it's affected your family. Just go ahead and answer that question. If it hasn't affected you, just say it hasn't affected me. I'm just curious to know. Yeah, you don't even have to say your name. It's up to you. I love how the fact that many of you are starting your responses with "to be honest." Yeah, that's good. I like honesty is important. It's important to be honest. interesting. Okay, so more expensive because I see someone wrote because of all the ordering takeaway food. It is. It gets very expensive. You know, we do it even as a family here. We do it more than we used to because of the situation here. So yep, I understand that one. Okay, so it doesn't affect you very much because you're a student, not using much money. All right, that's good. That's interesting. All right, doesn't affect me. Can't find part-time job. Yep, that's true for a lot of young people. Yeah, so you spend more online because you cannot go to the store. Yeah, online shopping is just so easy to do. It can actually end up causing you to spend more money. Yeah. Okay, didn't affect you. Did not affect you. It's affected your sports career. Whoever said that, I'd like to know more about that. I wonder how it's affected your sports career. Not fully affected. Doesn't affect me that much. Okay. Someone said financial is now better. Financial situation is now better since the pandemic because I'm living with my parents. Ah, okay. So I don't spend much money on anything, such as food. All right. Financial, but the family situation is affected. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Unable to find part-time job, right? Yeah. So several of you said you can't find part-time jobs. All right. Doesn't affect me that much. We have to restrain our expenses, but not to the point where we have to starve. Alhamdulillah. Now I want to work in the public sector. That's interesting. So it's actually whoever said that it's made you rethink your career goals, maybe, or your career choices, future career choices. That's really interesting. Actually, it does affect my parents, but somehow we managed to survive. Okay, that's good, and we're able to, saving money. Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. I mean, it's really, I think, made people aware of the importance of having some savings. Yeah. Especially now that we have this COVID, we have this particular pandemic. Who knows what the future's going to hold? There may be future pandemics, right? So yeah, it has made people realize the importance of savings. That's very good. Okay, not affected. Okay, not fully affected. Yeah, third phase of recession. That's right. Oh, okay. Need at least 3 months worth of expenses. Is our funds for the wisdom for the government servants at least 6 months. Yeah, that's interesting. Thinking about the future and how much you need to have saved up. Okay, that's an interesting insight there. Okay, family has helped you a lot. Okay, so parents have helped, families helped. All right, so family plays a big role in this, I see. Okay, yeah. Of course, mentally and physically it will affect you as well. Okay, so no sources of income. So whenever I get a little money, I would have kept that money in this situation, taught me to better manage my money. Okay, so that's a positive thing that has come out of it for you, whoever wrote this one, that the situation has again taught you to manage your money and to save more. So, and that's sometimes the best way to learn how to be financially disciplined. Yeah? Sometimes there's, as we always say in Islam, there's always a hikmah. There's always a blessing in hardship if we can see it, right? If we can learn from it, there's always a blessing in it. So, okay, interesting. Thank you for sharing all that. It's something that we need to reflect on because, of course, a lot of young people, especially young people, are going through hard times with COVID-19. All right. I'll stop this one. Oh, someone's still writing. Okay, whoever's still writing, go ahead and finish. In the meantime, I will switch gears. Okay. So what I'd like to do now is I'm going to continue, go back to our lecture from last week, which we did not finish, although we're almost finished. We stopped talking about here. Do you remember from last week? And we were talking about how young people are often targeted for their what? Do you remember what we were talking about here with this slide? Who remembers from last week?
For their money.
Yeah, for their economic power. Okay, so I'm sure you guys rarely think of yourselves as having economic power, right? But you do. You have a lot of economic power, especially collectively. When we think about young people or youth as a collective, as a group, then actually, yes, you have a lot of power, you have economic power. So yeah, so youth, young people are often marketed to, constantly marketed to. And like I mentioned last week, if you just drive around on your motorbike or your car or you walk around, you can see a lot of advertisements that really target young people as a demographic group, all right, for this purpose, all right. So here we showed some advertisements, okay? These are specifically for youth products. So definitions of youth are not just about age, okay? Definitions of youth, there's different ways of defining youth. We said last week age was one, and who can tell me again the age definition in Malaysia is what?
15 to 30.
Yeah, very good, 15 to 30, right. And in other countries, who remembers do you remember any of the other examples that we gave from other countries? Anyone remember? Do you remember this one? Okay, so we have the United Nations, remember? UN, 14 to 24. Commonwealth, 16 to 24, okay? So different age definitions, right? But we're not talking about age. Youth is also defined in other ways, and one of the ways is as a developmental stage. Developmental stage. So people think of youth as a time of exploration and opportunity, okay? When young people lay down the foundation for physical, psychological, and social maturity, right? It's a stage of growth. A lot of growth happens during youth, okay? Especially if you think about teenagers. What are some of the changes that teenagers go through? Can anybody tell me? In terms of their growth. Who knows? If you just reflect back on your own life as a teenager, what were some of the ways that teenagers grow? Those changes that they undergo. Anyone want to share? Amir, you want to share something? Youth as a stage of growth. A lot of growth happens during during youth? What are some of those ways that young people grow? Anyone? Can you think? For example, puberty.
Emotionally.
Okay. So emotionally, yes, young people grow emotionally. In what way do they grow emotionally?
As time flies, they tend to think better, like how to control their anger, how to control their feelings.
Okay.
It's just like when you are a teenager, you feel like you can just express your feeling through social media or through your
Okay.
action. But then as you grow up, you tend to just stay low key, and then you try to reflect back on what you are doing.
Okay. Very good, honey. Excellent. So yeah, usually in the teenage years, there is this thing, this sort of sense of volatility where emotionally you start to, I mean, people always think of teenagers as being very emotionally sensitive, right? So, um, but it's a stage where it's because of the growth that they're undergoing. So they begin to have adult-like emotions, right? And that's why a lot of teenagers fall in love, right? Because they begin to have these kinds of adult-like emotions. And of course, being the fact that they're young, it's something new to them and they don't really know how to manage them in many cases. Okay. So that's just one. So yeah, so emotionally they begin to grow. Physically they grow, right? Puberty. What happens during puberty? Lots of changes with physical, the body itself. Hormones start to change. Um, and then there's also, in terms of your cognitive ability to think, we know from science that, from scientific research, that the mind and the brain start to work at higher levels once young people,
That
adolescents.
tend to become more rational in making decisions.
Yeah, exactly. The cognitive mind allows for more rational thought, reasoning, complex reasoning. Um, the consciousness develops, right? Which is why a lot of young people lead social movements, right? You see a lot of social movements. Like now we have the environmental movement, right? The green movement. Many young people are leading those movements. This is also has to do with their idealism, but they begin to develop this conscience, right? This conscience, this these values, and that's all related to their ability to think at higher levels. They're able to relate to bigger issues and so forth. So all of this is a process of growth that defines that stage called youth. All right. So it's a developmental stage. It's one way we think of it. But it's also a period of life, and this is another way that people think about youth. And it's a life where young people begin to lay down patterns of life, like adult-like patterns, right? So the world of adults begins here, right? So young people start to form their beliefs, their values, their attitudes of adult life, right? So it's often why youth is considered to be a transitional phase. Transition from what? It's a transition from what? When people say youth is a period of transition, what do they mean? From what to what? Transition means from one thing to another. Right. So what is youth a transitional period about or of? Who'd like to share? Transition. Why? Where are they transitioning from, and where are they going? What does it mean to be in transition?
From teenager to adulthood.
Okay. All right. So teenager is typically, if we think about teenagers, I mean, if we say teenagers 15, 16, 17, that's part of the youth that people prefer. People refer to youth. That's part of it. Teenagers are definitely considered youth, right? In most definitions. In fact, in all definitions, teenagers are considered youth. So they're not transitioning from teenagers, yes, to adults, yes, but from what before? What comes before teenager? What are you before you're a teenager?
A kid.
Exactly, child. So you are Anna. Okay, so from a child to adult. Yeah, everybody knows what a child is. Easy to identify a child. Everybody knows what an adult is, right? Easy to identify adults. But a youth, what is a youth? Again, it's this idea of transition from children to adults. That's why often teenagers and even young adults, like those in their 20s, like you guys, often there's a lot of contradiction in how you're treated in society, right? Sometimes people treat you like children. Am I right? Am I right?
Yes.
That's okay. I can be wrong. You can tell me if I'm wrong. No problem. If you don't agree with me, that's fine. But even at UPM, don't you feel sometimes that adults treat you like children, even as university students? I'm always amazed at orientation at university, at UPM. Like your first week in university in UPM, and you guys have to, you have to sort of march together and walk together in straight lines, like you're in school, just like you're in school, right?
Yeah.
Don't you feel like you're being treated like children?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. It's not
Yeah.
necessary.
I don't like orientation.
Yeah, that's why. And I get the same impression when I look at you guys. I see the students and I go, my God, why are we treating these adults? You're adults, 18, you're young adults. Why are we treating them like children? But it's quite common. It's quite common. So youth are in this stage where they're often in between. They're not quite children, but not quite adults. Sometimes you're treated like children, sometimes you're treated like adults. Again, it's this transitional phase. And so it defines a lot in terms of how youth get treated. So for example, now you can vote at 18, right? That's the new law, right? Are you guys gonna all vote next time in the election?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's an adult role, right? To be able to vote for your leader is an adult obligation. It's an adult role that you're playing as a voter at 18. How old do you have to be to join the military? To become askar in Malaysia, how old do you have to be? Anybody know?
18.
18. Okay, so at 18 years old in Malaysia, you can vote, you can go and you can fight and die for your country as an askar, right? As a military. What can you do? What else? What can you not do yet? Driver's license, 18, right? Driver's license, 18. Are there
17.
oh, 17, sorry.
16.
17.
Sorry, 16.
So are there some things you can't do until you're 21? What can you not do until you're 21 in Malaysia? Anything? I think there are some.
Drinking.
Again.
Huh? Can you say again? I didn't hear you. Nabila, Fatin?
Buying cigarettes?
Okay. You have to be 21 to buy cigarettes?
I'm not
Take
sure.
a lorry,
Hazik?
take a lorry lesson.
How old? 21?
Yes.
21. Okay. So you cannot get a lorry license until you're 21. You
Yes.
can get a car license at 17, 16, no, 17, right? 18. But a lorry, you cannot drive until you're 21. Why? If you're an adult, you're an adult. Why would there be different ages? Okay. Again, the idea that youth is, it's this transitional period. In some cases, you're treated like children. In some cases, you're treated like adults. Even the age of adulthood, they don't even agree. If you're an adult, say you're an adult at 18, then everything, you should be able to do everything than an adult can do at 18. Should be the same, right? But they have different ages. Why? Because youth, we don't really know what you are. You're sort of in between. So it's this idea of transition. You are a group that is in transition. Okay, so this is a period of life. Different way of thinking about youth, right? And when we say development, just so you know, what does development mean? Because it means very different things. If you talk about national development, okay, pembangunan negara, okay, what does it mean? Well, it means a lot of different things. It has the connotation of growth, advancement, progress, become mature, maturation, expansion, evolution. It has all these kinds of meanings. Okay, so typically when we're talking about youth development, we're talking about all these things, right? Growth and progressing into a higher level of maturity and all these things, all right? And so the principles of youth development, these are the main principles of youth development then, okay? So the idea of youth, strengthening youth, okay? We want those involved in youth development want to make young people stronger, okay? Strengthen participation, okay? Young people as participants in decisions, societal decisions, in organizations, right? As youth, okay, as young adults, right? You should be involved in the decisions that affect you, right? You're not children anymore. So there should be participation, okay? And then connecting people in society and forming quality relationships, okay? Forming quality relationships is an important part of youth development, which we're going to see throughout the semester. All right, forming your values and belief system, social, cultural, spiritual, economic, all right? So identifying and forming these values and belief systems, being comfortable with one's identity, all right? How do you learn to be comfortable with your identity? All right, this is part of youth development as well. Do you like who you are as a person? Do you know who you are as a person? All right, these are questions for youth development. And then making a meaningful contribution to society. Right? So this is an important part of youth development, is providing opportunities for young people to make positive contributions to society. All right. So these are some of the principles that we're going to be discussing throughout the semester, as these are the main principles, or some of the main principles of what youth development is all about. Okay. Any questions about that? So that's the end of the first set of slides from last week, the first lecture last week on introduction, okay? And so now I'm just gonna quickly shift to the today's topic of theories. So of course, I know a lot of people don't like theory. Theory is boring. Theory is dry. Theory can be sometimes complicated and confusing, okay? In this course, I don't spend a lot of time talking about theory, but we do, for weeks 2 and 3, we do discuss a little bit about theory, because it's really important to understand our how we understand and how we look at and how we try to explain how young people develop and what youth development is all about. All right, so theory plays an important role in how we work with young people, how we relate to young people. Okay, it's not just something that just sits in a book. We actually use theory, especially when we formulate programs, when we formulate courses and so forth. We want to actually work with youth and help develop youth. This is where theories become very important. And most importantly, it helps us to understand young people. Okay, so a theory, what is a theory? I mean, I'm sure you guys have heard about theory, you've learned theory, but have we ever really understood what theory really is? So a principle or a collection of principles that explain and or predict some behavior or phenomenon. So we use theory to try and explain why people behave the way they do, or why, this is in social sciences, of course, what explains people's behavior, either individual people or groups, right? So theories theories to understand youth development tend to be multidisciplinary, right? So in youth development, we don't only look at psychology, right? We don't only look at sociology. We emphasize on what's called the social psychological, okay? Social psychological. So psychology deals with what? Who knows? Psychology typically deals with what? It's the study of what? Anytime in English you see ology, it means the study of something. So psychology is the study of what?
Behavior.
Behavior, okay? Well, it's not specifically the study of behavior, but if we understand people's psychology, we do, yes, we get insight into their behavior because we get insight into why they behave the way they do. Okay, but what is psychology the study of if it's not behavior?
Emotional and mental.
Okay, yes.
Cognitive.
Yes, cognitive, the mind, right? Now, what you guys are referring to is the mind. It's the study of the mind. It's the study of thought. It's the study of psyche. Now, typically, the word psyche actually used to mean the soul. So many, many years ago, originally, psychology was the study of the soul, not the mind. Okay? So if you look at Islamic psychology, for example, it's the study of the individual. It's the study of the soul and the mind, because the soul and the mind, the intellect, go together. But because of secularism and secular sciences and so forth, they sort of migrated away from that, and they cut out the soul, and they only focus on the mind. So modern psychology is more of the study of just the mind and cognitive thought. Islamic psychology and other more traditional psychologies, not just Islamic, there's other traditional psychologies, they include the study of the soul as well. Okay, so it's hard to really, especially if you come from that perspective, if you come from a religious perspective, it's hard to deny the study of the soul as part of the study of the mind, right? But modern psychology is more about the study of the mind, how the mind affects behavior. Okay, how about sociology? What's sociology all about? Study of what? Socio refers to what? Sociology. So psychology.
Social life, social change.
Sorry? Do you want?
Social life, social change.
Yeah, social life. So basically how people socialize, how they relate to each other. So it's more the study of groups of people and group behavior in society. So psychology is the individual, right? Study of the individual, thought, and so forth. Sociology is the study of group behavior. So when you combine them into social psychology or social psychological, you get both. You get the individual and how groups and how social life affects them. Okay, so we take a social psychological approach to studying young people. That's what youth development is all about. It also includes education. We also include education, especially non-formal education, like the kind of education young people get when they join youth programs or they're involved in youth organizations, right? There's an important educational element to that and to those experiences that also plays a big role in understanding youth development. Okay, how young people develop, how they grow, depends on these different things. Okay, so theories are just tools, right? Theories are tools. Like you wouldn't cut a pizza with a saw. Okay, as you can see the guy there, he's trying to cut a pizza with a saw. You have to use the right tool for what you want to do. Okay, so to cut a pizza, we won't use a saw. We're gonna use a pizza cutter. All right. All theories have weaknesses, and they all have holes in them. There's no perfect theory that explains every kind of behavior, and that's because human beings, the study of people is not like studying plants or animals, right? So like if you have friends that are in faculty of science or faculty of engineering, right? They have very nice, neat, very precise theories about how things happen in their fields. So for example, how the palm oil tree, okay, how the palm tree grows. Okay, it's very easy to study a palm tree and to predict using a theory how that tree will grow under different circumstances, because a tree is just a tree. Human beings are a lot different than trees. We are a lot more complex than trees. We're a lot more complicated than trees. So even though we have theories that explain human behavior, they're not that precise because human beings are unpredictable. All right. One morning you wake up, you feel like eating nasi lemak. The next morning you wake up, you feel like eating roti canai. Why? Is there a theory that can explain that? No. It's just part of being a human being, right? We are complex creatures, right? We have mind, we have body, we have soul. So we are not as easy to predict as things like animals and plants. So the social sciences, our theories are not as precise and not as accurate as theories in the biological and the natural sciences, okay? So that's why all theories have weaknesses in the social sciences. They're not as strong or not as precise. But they help us to understand and to frame how we work with youth, right? So the idea is that we want to look at these theories and we want to examine the strengths of each theory and then how we can use them when we want to implement programs, for example, for young people. So you guys as being future HRD leaders, which you all are, inshallah, one way or another, you are our future HRD leaders. Either you're going to be HRD officers or you're going to be HRD executives or something. You will be working with young people, especially in the context of organizations. And so it's very important that you understand youth and young people's behavior and their development so that when you become HRD officers, you can help them within your organizational context, right? So you want to create programs, you want to create systems in your organization that can help your young employees. So youth development is a very important course for you guys to take, and it's very important for you to understand some of these theories. Okay, so over the course of the history of the study of youth, there have been changes in perspectives. Okay, so there's basically phase 1 and phase 2. All right, so today we're going to talk mostly about phase 1, what we call deficit-based theories. All right, so as you can see there from the slide, within deficit-based theories, there's two main themes. Okay, one is called protection, one is called prevention. Okay, so what this means is that when people started studying youth and youth behavior, they started studying youth from the context of youth needing to be protected from society, right? So youth needed to be isolated from the demands and the evils of adult society, right? And youth behavior was something that people feared and they should be alarmed about, right? So we want to study young people in terms of protection, both their protection and protection from them, as well as prevention. We want to study them and we want to understand them according to preventing the harm that they can cause. Okay. Remember last week I showed you those pictures of young people doing all those things like committing crime and drinking alcohol and all these things. And I mentioned that a lot of times in the media, youth are portrayed as something to be feared, right? Do you remember that from last week? Okay. So that is often the way, when we talk about deficit-based theories, this is often why those theories existed, because of this idea that young people are something to be feared and they need to be separated and isolated from society, from adult society. Okay. So initially, a lot of the theories about youth development were focused on what we call deficits. What is a deficit? What does the word deficit mean? Anybody know in English? Who can tell me what does deficit mean?
It's like a shortage or lack in something.
Lacking something. Excellent. Yeah, great, Shamimi. Yep, that's one way to think of it. So, for example, if you have a financial deficit, you lack money, right? You lack money. And that's exactly it. It's something that is lacking. So when we talk about deficit-based theories of youth, those theories were always about understanding that young people were missing something, right? There's missing something. There's something that they don't have that they should have, right? That's why they're always getting into trouble. That's why they're always causing problems, okay? It's because of this idea that they have weaknesses, they have deficits, and we need to reverse those deficits. We need to correct those deficits in order to help them, okay? This is very much based on what we call the medical model. The medical model, all right? So the deficit-based theory is very much on the medical model. What is the medical model? Anybody know the medical model of treatment? Like treating disease? How do we treat diseases? How do we treat diseases usually in medicine? Anybody want to share? How do we treat diseases? What's the medical model of treating disease? What happens when you go to the doctor and you say, I'm sick, I have some flu or something, sisama, whatever? What does the doctor do? Anyone? Come on. It's not hard to answer this question. What happens when you go to the doctor and you tell the doctor you're sick? What does the doctor do?
Give some
The doctor-
medicine.
Thank you, Hazik. They give medicine, treatment, the treatment model, right? You have a deficit. You have a deficit in terms of your health. You're sick. So the doctor gives you treatment, ubat, okay? Well, this is the same thing in social science, in youth development, this medical model. The deficit-based theory says that there's something wrong with young people that needs to be corrected. So we need to correct the young people's problems. That's the deficit-based theory. There's something they're lacking that we need to provide them, okay? And so that's what these early theories were about, okay? They were framed according to a deficit-based approach. Young people are a problem that need to be corrected, okay? So young people themselves were the problem. Not that they had problems, they were the problem, okay? Young people as problems that need to be corrected, all right? This is what the medical model, what the deficit-based theories were all about, okay? And then what happened was there was a shift in thinking. This changed though, because people started to realize that this didn't really work very well, right? And so we migrated to something called the positive developmental approach, or the positive theories, okay, positive youth theories. So these entailed two things, promotion and partnership, okay? So let's start with the deficit-based theories. Let's get out of here. Okay. So we'll start with the deficit-based theories. Oh, how do I get rid of my text here? Hold on. Uh-oh. Okay. So let's start with the deficit-based theories. All right. So the first one is called the psychoanalytic theories of youth. All right. And so these set of theories, there's a few here, as you see, there's 5. These theories provide understanding of the psychological processes that take place during adolescence. All right. So we focus on 5 theories. We don't go into depth. We're just going to touch on them. Okay. We're not going to go too much into these theories, just to touch on them, just so we have a basic idea of these theories and what they're about. And so we'll start with Freud. I'm not sure if you ever heard of Freud, Sigmund Freud, famous psychiatrist, psychoanalyst. Okay, so he had this theory of the id, ego, and superego. Okay, basically the structure of personality. All right. So basically, Freud theorized, his theory was that the basic personality of a person is structured according to these 3 things. Right, 3 things. Right. So we have the id, okay? This one here, oh sorry, that should be underneath. The ego, and then the super ego, okay? So these three things. And the first one, also known as the id, is that part of ourselves that strives to meet its basic needs. Okay, it's the biological forces within us. Okay, the part of us that seeks to maximize pleasure. Okay, we want instant gratification. We want to do what we want to do. The want, the nafs, as we say in Islam, right? We refer to it as the nafs in Islam. It's that same element. Okay, it's another way of framing it, but it's essentially that part of us that always wants, that desires things, right? And Freud said that, well, if these needs or wants are not met, a person becomes tense or anxious. So when you're hungry and you want to eat, what happens if you cannot get food? You become like what's called hangry. Have you heard of hangry?
Yes.
Yeah.
you all get hangry, I guess. So yeah, we get angry, right? When we can't eat and we want to eat, right? We become tense or anxious because of that need. We want our needs, our biological needs met. Okay, that is the id. Okay, and that is also referred to as the first level or the first stage of the nafs, as we say in Islam. The nafs amarah in Islam it's called, but it's the same thing. It's that biological force that strives to meet its and maximize its pleasures. Then there's the second sort of structure of the personality, which is the ego. And I'm sure you've heard of the word ego before. Well, the ego in Freud's model, the ego is the rational thinking part of us, okay, the part that deals with reality. All right. So the ego, while it tries to meet the needs of the id, as you can see here, it tries to meet the needs of the id, it does it in a way that's socially acceptable. All right. So the ego recognizes that other people have needs and wants as well, and that being selfish is not always good for us in the long run. So it's the rational thinking part of us. So like, yeah, I want to eat, I'm starving, but I can't leave class, right? Because if I leave class, Prof. Latif will get mad at me, and then I won't get credit for attendance, and then people will think that I'm, cutting class. So that's the ego part of us. It's that part that deals, right? The deal maker, that's the ego. Right? So we have the id, which is like, I want. And then the ego says, well, wait a minute. Okay, you can't just go off and do whatever you want. You have to consider other people. You have to consider society. You have to consider how people are going to look at you, how you're going to perceive you. That's Freud's ego. Okay, and then there's this super ego, which is the moral voice of social conscience. Okay, so it's that higher sense of self, right? And this one tends to develop last, right? As young people develop, as we know, for example, like little kids, right? If you have little, baby siblings, right? Younger siblings, you look at the way kids are. They want to eat. They want their toys. They want to play. They want. They haven't yet developed that ability to really rationalize yet, right? And as you guys mentioned earlier in the class, right? When we become teenagers, we begin to think, we start to be able to develop that rational thought faculty, right? So we can think rationally. That's part of youth development, right? As we get older, that part of us develops. Eventually, we will develop what's called a superego, or that sort of voice of social conscience, right? Where we begin to formulate morals and judgments about right and wrong. Okay? And this also happens in youth, especially in late adolescence. We begin to develop our moral values. Right? And young people tend to be very strong in their belief in moral values, especially the social conscience aspect, right? As I mentioned before, you see young people leading social movements, right? It's wrong to pollute the environment, right? It's wrong to be unjust to minorities. It's wrong to take advantage of poor people, right? This is all that superego, that voice of social conscience, right? So this is the basic structure of Freud's theory on personality. And so you can see how it is definitely developmental in the sense that over time, First, of course, we start with the id, our basic needs. That's all children, young children, and young people. And then we begin to develop the ability to rationalize, to think rationally, and then eventually we develop that idea of right and wrong and being able to make moral judgments. Okay. Any questions about any of that? Anyone have any questions?
No.
No, okay, so let's move on. So here's just an example of how this sort of plays out. Okay, so you have the id saying I want it now. That's the id. The ego says, well, wait a minute, you can't just go out and just take it. You know, you need a plan. How are you going to get it? You have to consider this. You have to consider that. Right? The superego comes in and says, no, you can't have it. It's not right. You cannot just go and steal that money. It's wrong. Right? So I want that money. The ego, the id says, the ego says, well, let's think about how we're going to do it. You know, we can't get caught if we do it. We can't have people finding out that we're going to steal this money. Then the superego comes in and says, well, you know what? You can't have it. It's not right. Okay, so that's the superconscious, the voice of reason, the moral voice. All right. So these are some of the psychoanalytical concepts of Freud's ego theory. Okay, here's another example. The id says, I want chocolate. Right? And the ego says, well, you know, if you eat too much chocolate, you're going to get fat and it's not good for you. So maybe just a small piece. Right? Just a small piece. And then that superego comes in and says, well, you know what? You're on a diet. You shouldn't have any chocolate. It's wrong to eat that chocolate. Okay. So as you can see, these are, I think, pretty clear examples of how this sort of personality structure works. Okay. And so this is a deficit-based theory. Why is this a deficit-based theory? Why is this considered a deficit-based theory? Can anybody guess? Thinking about youth development and how these faculties might develop in young people, why would you think this would be a deficit-based theory? In what way would this qualify as a deficit-based theory? Anybody want to guess? So we see young people doing all these bad things, right? I'm a policymaker. I have to come up with a program. I have to come up with some resolution to this. Young people doing all these bad things. And I'm going to use this Freud theory to do my planning, what I'm going to do. How would I use it? Why is this a deficit-based theory? How would I apply this to help young people? Can anybody? Yes? Any written response? Put something in the chat box. Somebody want to guess? How can we use this to explain youth development in a way that's considered a deficit-based sort of way of thinking about it? Okay, so if we see that, if we see that young people are doing a lot of things they're not supposed to be doing, what does that imply about the theory? What does that imply about where they're at in terms of their development of their id, ego, and superego? Come on, guys. Nobody has any ideas. Nothing? Blank? Well, okay. Young people are doing what they're doing because they're still at the stage of id. They haven't developed that super ego. The super ego has not developed yet. right? They haven't developed that moral conscience yet, so they need help, right? The reason that they're doing all these things they shouldn't be doing, right? Again, deficit-based approach. The reason they're doing all these things they shouldn't be doing is because they have not adequately developed their superego, right? So they need an intervention. They need some kind of psychotherapy. They need something that's going to help and correct them so that they learn right and wrong, right? They haven't developed that part of their personality yet to prevent them from committing all these bad things that they're doing. Okay, so it's used as a way to look at deficits, young people's deficits. What's missing? What do they not have that they need to have to do the right thing and to develop appropriately? All right. So that's why psychoanalysis, which is what Freud, this is what he practiced, was used as a way to correct people's behavior, right? Again, to cure them of the problem, right? Again, using the medical model, right? Somebody has a problem, you give them the medicine, the ubat. Okay, so this is sort of like an ubat. Okay, give them psychoanalysis and help them to develop that that understanding of themselves to help them to correct their behavior. Okay, so this was used as a it's used as a deficit-based theory, looking at young people as deficits. Something's missing. You know, they need help. They need to be corrected, right? And we use this model to correct them. Okay, so that's basically how it would work. Okay, a second one, and after this we'll take a short break. Okay, it's already 9:15. The second one is Hall's storm and stress model. Oh, actually, we only go to 10, right? And you guys have class at 10 o'clock, right? Another class? Am I right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so we won't break. We'll just go straight until about 9:45. Okay, is that all right?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, you guys can stop at 9:45 and prepare for your next class. So another deficit-based model is called Hall's storm and stress model. Okay, so Hall, this is very early. You see, 1904. Right, so these ways of thinking about young people were very early on in terms of modern society. They were very early on, and they're mostly psychological, mostly from psychologists, looking at, again, why young people are doing all these bad things. How do we correct young people? Okay, that's the deficit model. So storm and stress looks at three things: conflict with parents, mood disruptions, and risk behavior. Okay, so do you guys, when you were, well, you're still young people, but especially when you were in teenagers, did you have a lot of conflict with your parents?
Yes.
You did. Did all of you have conflict with your parents? A lot of conflict with your parents?
No.
No. Okay, Hazik says no. Anyone else?
No.
Yes.
Some yeses, some nos. Okay. All right. Well, that pretty much sums it up. Is that not all young people have conflict with parents, although some do, and there's reasons for that. In fact, as a parent of a teenager, I have two teenage kids. There's, especially with my son, there is a certain level of conflict. Okay, but that's understandable because of the understanding teenagers, understanding adolescents and what they're going through in terms of their need for independence, right? So teenagers, because they're moving out of childhood and into adulthood, they begin to desire more independence, right? And so this often comes into conflict with parents who expect them to do certain things. So there is this idea of conflict with parents, but it's not across the board. Not all young people have conflict with their parents. But in those days, 1904, Hall, he theorized that he saw so many cases of young people having this conflict with parents. He said this has to be a common part of adolescence, okay, adolescence or the teenage years, right? So Hall's storm and stress model is all about, like it says, storm and stress. The teenage years, adolescence, youth is all about volatility and conflict, and storm and stress. And then there's mood disruptions, right? Young teenagers are very moody. Is that right? Are teenagers moody? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
You guys are still probably moody. Even adults,
Very.
we're all moody. Everyone's moody, right? We go through moods. Right?
No.
No. Who said no? No one has moods? Hanim, you don't have any bad moods.
Oh, no, not me.
Oh, who said that? I'm sorry, I can't see. Nabila.
Effie.
Oh, Effie, sorry, Effie, I don't see you on my screen. So you don't have moods. You're not moody.
Mm, 3 months. I mean, rarely.
Rarely. Okay. No, that's fine. Everyone's different. Everyone's different. Some young people are moody, some are not, right? So this is why Hall's storm and stress model has been sort of debunked. People don't really follow it as much anymore because it's been pretty much proven that this is not true of all young people, right? This is, again, one way of looking. There's a possibility that young people could be like this because of the fact that they go through so much change. Their bodies start to change, their hormones start to change, their status in society starts to change, they become more like adults, yet they're still living at home with the parents. So there's a possibility of conflict there, right? So instead of all young people going through storm and stress, there's just the fact that some do and some don't, right? So Hall's storm and stress model is not as popular as it used to be because it's pretty much been debunked as a way of looking at all young people. Okay, and he also looked at risk behavior. So a lot of young people, they take risky behaviors. Okay, so for my especially for my the young men in the class, okay, what are some of the risky behaviors that young people engage in? Okay, we can just look at the highway and look at the young people on the motorbikes. Okay, that's one good example of risky behavior. Right, looking at the way that young people ride motorbikes is a risk behavior. They like to take chances. They like to take risks. Right, and that's very common among young people. So Hall saw this as part of his model, storm and stress. So young people are also engaged in a lot of risk behaviors. Okay, young people like to experiment with different things. They like to experiment with drugs. They like to experiment with relationships. Right, they like to experiment with lots of things. Right. Again, this is normal behavior in the sense that it's because of the fact, again, that they are entering the adult world for the first time. So they begin to try and experience adult behaviors, right? So it's actually a normal aspect of development is young people wanting to try new things. Okay, Hall saw that as risk behavior. Okay, so as you see here, it says not all adolescents experience storm and stress, but storm and stress are more likely during adolescence than other ages, okay? And that's probably true. Right. Any questions about storm and stress? So I kind of want to go through these rather quickly because we don't focus so much on these in the class, but again, like I said, we just want to touch on them, okay? All right, so now we move on to Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. Okay. Oh, by the way, can you guys all see why this is considered a deficit-based theory about youth in terms of thinking about youth and how youth develop? This is pretty clearly a deficit-based theory, right? Trying to explain what's wrong with youth. Why are youth so messed up? That's the deficit-based theory. What's wrong with these young people? Okay, that's the idea. That's the mentality of people that focus on deficit-based theories. What's wrong with them? Okay, they try to identify what's wrong with them and reverse, change, treat those issues. Okay. Now, Erik Erikson was a developmental psychologist. I'm sorry. And so he formulated what are called the stages of psychosocial development. All right. So he said that every stage of life has its own psychosocial task. Okay. In other words, each stage in life is a crisis that needs to be resolved before you can move to the next stage. Okay. And so here are the different stages. There's infancy, early childhood, adolescence, young adulthood, adulthood, and maturity. All right. And so his stages look like this. All right. So at each stage, and these are the stages here on the left, there is a task that must be accomplished. So for example, the infant, the baby, learns to trust the caregiver or the parents. All right. So if they learn to trust, in other words, if there's a healthy relationship between the baby and the parent, they will move on to the next stage in a healthy manner. In other words, they will develop in a healthy way. If they don't learn trust, in other words, say they grow up in a very dysfunctional kind of family and the parents neglect the baby, and there's certain cases, we have cases of baby dumping, right, in Malaysia, or there's cases where there's child maltreatment, they abuse the children or whatever. If the child doesn't learn trust here, then there's a good chance that for the rest of their life they will have a hard time trusting other people. All right, so that's the idea here, is that each stage they must learn these tasks in order to become healthy, to move on, to become psychologically, socially healthy. Okay, so the second stage, the toddler, the young child, learns autonomy versus shame and doubt. Okay, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not going to go through all these. I want to focus on the ones that involve youth, right? So which two of these involve youth? These two, teenager and young adult, the green ones. Okay, so we're focusing on these two. So Erickson said that for the teenager, the main task, the main thing that a teenager has to overcome is to learn their identity, okay? As opposed to if they don't learn, basically, if they don't settle on their identity, they will grow up with this confusion of who they are, right? Who am I, right? And there have been scholars that have actually even said that this has a lot to do with, or is related to, we see a lot of this today where we have this LGBT movement and these things, and a lot of that has been related to confusion in terms of gender role. It's called gender role confusion or gender role dysfunction, where young people don't learn appropriately what the role of their gender is. So for example, like you're a male, what does it mean to be a male? And you're a female, what does it mean to be a female? So they become confused. There's this confusion in their identity, right? And then that later grows into something like LGBT and so forth. Okay, so that's one way of looking at that issue, and this is one of the things. So, but in another sense, in a more normal sense, sort of everyday, all young people go through this, and we know that teenagers, one of the experiences that teenagers have is identity development, is identifying who am I, right? What do I like? What do I want to be? Who am I as a person? What's meaningful to me? What's my purpose in life? All these kinds of identity questions come up in the age of adolescence, teenagers. So a young person has to settle on their identity at this age, right, as a teenager. And then when they become a young adult, the next phase, there's this thing, this task is intimacy versus isolation. So young adults typically, and this varies from culture to culture. So what happens after you guys will graduate from university? Most of you, many of you, will begin to think about what? After you graduate from university, what? Huh?
Marriage.
Marriage, exactly. Family, marriage, okay. So in Malaysia now, culturally, it's still the cultural norm for most people, not all, of course, and that's changing, but most people will think about these kinds of things. Getting married, having a family, all right, getting career and all that. So you must learn as a young adult, the task that you must learn is intimacy. Learn how to be intimate with a life partner, right? Future husband, future wife. If not, if you don't learn that, then you may end up having this sense of isolation for much of your life. And this is what Erickson predicted. Okay? So he used these tasks to identify the problems that young people face. Oh, well, because they never really settled on their identity when they were teenagers, they're having all these problems later on, right? They don't, and we see this among teenagers, it's like one day they want to be one thing, one day they want to be the next thing, and they're confused all the time. It's this identity exploration. They're trying to explore their identity, who they want to be, okay? And so he used these as ways of identifying problems among young people, right? They haven't learned intimacy, so they're involved in all these at-risk behaviors, they're involved in a lot of promiscuous sexual activity. Why? Because they haven't really learned intimacy. They haven't learned it appropriately within the confines of marriage. They haven't learned it appropriately, so they're trying to get it in unhealthy ways, right? Now, according to Erickson, that would be because they never accomplished that task of achieving intimacy as a young adult, all right? So again, deficit-based theory, Erickson used these as ways to understand youth problems, okay? Any questions? I'm sure that's kind of complicated, but if you have questions, please feel free to ask. So in the in the reading for next week, the chapter that you're going to read, these theories are not in that chapter. Those theories only deal with the positive youth development theories, which we're going to discuss next week. Okay, so that's why I'm going through these a little bit quickly. So if you have questions, please ask. Okay, so the next one, if you don't have a question, I'll keep going. Okay. Oops. So I just want to highlight those three. This should be a video, but it's not playing. Oh yeah, okay. So I just want to look at this. Let's watch this short video on adolescent psychosocial development, looking at the way that we can use some of these theories.
The psychosocial development for adolescents is Erickson's stage of identity versus role confusion. The key developmental task is that adolescents need to form a sense of identity and decide who they are and what type of person they will be.
What do you want to do in the future?
To tell you the truth, I don't really know 100%. There's a bunch of things that I like to go into. Like, I'm really into writing, so I could go into journalism, or I'm also really into politics, so I sort of want to go into that. But I really like science, so right now I have no idea.
It kind of changes every week, but right now I'm thinking something in the medical field, not a doctor, because I want more patient interaction.
If they don't form a sense of identity, they develop a sense of role confusion and may have difficulty achieving effectively as adults because they don't know who they are.
Do you think that you are treated like an adult?
Sometimes, depending who I'm around.
Teenagers are caught between being seen as a child and approaching adulthood, which can be a confusing period because of the expectations society places on them. This is an important struggle for the developing adolescent.
Do you think that when you're out in public or in school that adults treat you unfairly? And if you do you have any examples of when that might have happened to you?
Yes, because, I don't know, where I work, some of the older customers think that you're just this young teenager girl who doesn't know much, but really I do know a lot more than what most people think. I don't know, they just treat you oh, you're this little teenager, don't talk. And
most people have this stereotype that teenagers are rebellious and they just do whatever they want.
Can you tell me a little bit more about how that makes you feel when people do that to you?
It's aggravating. You want to throw their change in their face. It really is. It's so frustrating.
It's important when the nurse is approaching or working with the adolescent that the nurse listens to what the teen has to say, and the nurse needs to listen with a non-judgmental attitude.
Communicating with adolescents can be quite challenging sometimes because they're in a period of important transition. They're moving away from the security of their families into the world where there's pressures and learning to gain self-identity, confidence, and security. So when you're approaching an adolescent, it's really important that you maintain a very calm, non-judgmental, and open approach that's welcoming and warm to the teenager and that's very accepting. And it looks here like you're 18?
Yes.
Well, the first-time visits require a little bit more time. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. It's just to provide you with the best care, get to know each other. And then after that, we'll focus on anything that concerns you. Okay? Are you taking any medications right now?
Not right now.
Any allergies to medicines?
No.
What grade are you in, Bethany? Are you in school? Are you working?
I'm a senior in high school.
Oh, congratulations.
Oh,
Big
thank
year,
you.
huh?
Thanks.
What high school do you go to?
Marlboro High School.
And how are things going this year for you?
They're going pretty well. I mean, it's kind of just coasting because just getting ready. I'm about ready to be done, you know. I'm just waiting at this point because I'm all set. So.
Senior year typically is one of the busiest years, lots of big decisions to make. How are you managing your classes, your academics?
I don't know. Things are pretty easy at this point. I mean, I guess the teachers just sort of assume that, you know, they're not going to do any work, so we're not going to assign any work. So it works for me.
What are your grades like?
They're good. Mostly A's and B's.
Excellent. Do you have any future goals for yourself?
Just to, I guess, go to college and do well and expand my horizons, I guess.
Now, have you decided on a certain track that you're going to take?
Psychology and theater.
Great. Do you find that you have like lots of groups of friends at school?
Yeah, I mean, I've got plenty of friends, but I don't know. I have a problem with closed-mindedness, I guess. And I guess that's something I'm looking forward to in college, is just being with kids who are more accepting and more willing to, you know, accept.
Do you find that there's a lot of cliques in school?
Oh, absolutely. And I don't know if that's going to change, but, I mean, I guess I've found my clique. I don't really like that word, but they exist, you know.
They do. Every high school tends to have groups of peers that are attracted based on clothes or a way of talk, a way of music. What I think is really important is for you to have a group that you feel comfortable in, and it sounds like that's the case with your...
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of, I don't like to associate myself with one particular group, like I'm a jock or I'm a music geek or whatever. I mean, I kind of like
so you're versatile.
I try to be.
Communication can be challenging in the sense that they're still confused. There may be periods of role confusion. They're not necessarily confident. They don't know exactly who they are. They're in a stage of experimentation.
Okay. So I just want to show that it's a good illustration of what Erickson is talking about here in terms of identity and role confusion. And this is quite common among especially teenagers. They're exploring themselves and their roles in life for the first time. So there's a lot of confusion. When you talk, especially when you talk to teenagers at this age, it's a lot of I don't knows, right? Because they don't, you know, they're expected to know things, but they just don't know yet. And so that's really what Erickson was talking about. Okay. So if we summarize these deficit-based theories briefly, okay, we can see that young people have certain psychological characteristics common to their age groups, okay, to their age group. And youth is a stage of development where the foundations for attitudes and values are laid down, even though it's still a lot of exploration. They don't really know where they're at yet, but this is where the foundations begin to get laid down. That's why it's a very important phase of life, actually. And that's one of the things that's always interested me in wanting to study young people is this. It's a very important phase of life, and it's a very interesting phase of life because it's really where those foundations for our adult attitudes and values are formed. All right. The transition often involves some kind of rebellious phase, and that's seen as normal in the sense that because they're going through so much change and they are again beginning to enter that world of adulthood, they begin to see things maybe differently, or they begin to formulate their own ideas about things. And so this creates a sort of rebelliousness in a certain way. Okay, it doesn't happen with all young people. Not all youths, not all teenagers are rebellious, of course, but with some young people that happens. Okay, and for, again, the deficit-based theories say that for successful transition, youth may need some kind of professional help, again, to help them or to address these problems that they have. Okay, and so this is really a summary of the deficit-based theories. Okay, and like you just saw in the video, that woman, she was I think a nurse, but she's trained to help teenagers, to work with teenagers, and that's the kind of help or advice that is often provided for young people, just to get them to talk about, you know, what they're going through, and if they need advice on making decisions, and you know, so this idea that young people are always in need because they're always having problems. That's the kind of idea of the deficit-based theories of youth. Okay. So I already asked you this question about storm and stress. All right. So any questions about the deficit-based theories that I just went through? Any questions?
No.
No. Okay, fair enough. So briefly, before we go, I just want you to take 5 minutes. And as I said last week, every class I want to have this time for you to reflect on the lecture. So each week, just identify 1 or 2 things. It says 3. 1 or 2 things that you significant learning from the lecture each week. Okay, let me just copy the link here. All right, so go ahead and write a significant learning or 2 from what you just learned in terms of the lecture. And again, this will help you to reflect and help you to think about the most important aspects of the lecture. This will prepare you for the exam, and it'll also help you to recall back later about these topics. So just go ahead and go on the Padlet and reflect on 1 or 2 things that you learned from the lecture. And I'm going to record all. I'm going to save all these. I'm going to save all these and record them, and then we'll keep a running tally of them.
Excuse me, Prof.
Yeah.
This time, should we put our magic number or names or let it anonymous?
No, you don't need to put your name. It can be anonymous.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I see some of you are just writing down. So a significant learning is something that's meaningful to you. So try to think about what was something that we discussed or that you found was specifically meaningful. You don't need to list and bullet point all that, just anything that you found was meaningful. That's why it's referred to as a significant learning. Also, before I forget, please make sure to sign in, yeah? The attendance, click on the attendance link for today on Putra Blast, don't forget. Okay, and then also for tomorrow as well. Like I said, you know, I would just encourage you to make use of your time tomorrow outside of the class to read the chapter. And again, you can share notes on the chapter. There's no problem there if you want to share your notes with your classmates. Okay, some interesting stuff. Some of you I can see are having a hard time identifying. That's okay. Okay, and I know it's hard. A lot of people have a hard time concentrating in online lectures. I know it's difficult. It's distracting, you know, because it's easy to do other things. I go through the same thing when I'm listening to online lectures and webinars and all that. So I understand it's a challenge. And I don't want to do too much lecturing, especially in the online format, because I know it can be a bit draining. But of course we have to do some lecturing, but I try to limit it only to about an hour every week. Other than that, we'll try to do more interactive things. Okay, that's why I really encourage you all to to join in and to participate in the class to make it more interesting and to make it more interactive and less monotonous. Okay, so just go ahead and finish up your thoughts here on the significant learnings. And once you're done, we can close up. I want to give you a little bit of time before your next class. All right. All right. Anything else? Any closing remarks, questions, anything at all?
No, doctor.
Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, then I'll let you go. We'll close up for the day. So have a good rest of the week, and inshallah, we'll see you next week. Okay?
Okay, doctor. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you, doctor.
Okay. Have a good week. Allah see you next week.
Doctor. Thank you, doctor. Have a nice day.
You too. Thanks, Mimi. All right. Assalamualaikum. See you next week, inshallah.
See you, tutor.
Waalaikumsalam.
Bye-bye.
Bye, doctor.